how important was it to you to not just be scary or funny, but to have a sort of political tone?
Well, it was tricky. I know in post-production there was a little bit of apprehension about the political tone, but I think you have to have that because, in a way, Zombie Strippers is kind of like a sketch, a prolonged sketch. And I think that what supports it as a satire is the in-jokes referencing Ionesco, theater, as well as all of the politics of the piece. And what it delivers on the surface, of course, is sort of a rollicking horror farce, which is absurd, like Ionesco, but is also has that great kind of horror farce joke content that like a really good early Sam Raimi film like Evil Dead or something has in it, which is that you deliver your gore and you deliver your guts and you deliver your blood, but it's kind of fun. It's almost as a punchline. It's how it's cut in. And there's a time when it should scare you, and it's a time when it should make you uncomfortable. And when you put whenever you put death and sex together, those are two polar positions that grate against each other really interestingly. In novels and in movies and in rock and roll. And I think that's what Jay Lee, the director, had in mind, was kind of throwing it all up against the wall, almost like when you're cooking pasta al dente and you're trying to see if that pasta will stick on the wall. You throw it up there, and some stuff sticks a little better than the others, but it all needs to be there because it is a kind of a collage.
Well, in the movie, it looks like everyone knows exactly who they want to be in the character. It seems like everything was very planned out. Was there a lot of rehearsal before?
There wasn't a lot of rehearsal. I mean, we talked about it. We had a really good read-around at the old Coronet Theater on La Cienega Boulevard, which was kind of fun and romantic, and we got a sense then of just how far we could go. But, when it's staged, sometimes, Jay was just running and gunning, as we say, because you knew he had to do a big master, get all the actors in one shot, and then move the plot along. Because it was a low-budget movie, he had to spend more time on something else. So we were going to have to wait for somebody to come out of some horror makeup or something, which took longer than was to be expected. So we would try to kind of see the frame line in our mind's eye as a proscenium in the theater, and play it kind of like a farce, almost like the old French farce Beto, where doors are slamming and people are running down halls sometimes. A scene in particular, we all pretend to hide behind furniture in one shot. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff, which is just on the run, using imagination, taking ideas from Jay, coming up with our own. And that's tricky, because Jay is such a master of all the trades. He's an editor, he's a cinematographer, he's a writer, he's a gaffer, he's a lighting technician, he's a casting agent. He's all these different elements together. And, on a low-budget movie, that can spread you pretty thin. And there comes a point, and I know this as a director too, when I could tell Jay's got it all in his mind. And I felt in good hands. But not necessarily all of us at that moment had it all in our mind, Right. So you just sort of have to surrender, And I was able to surrender to Jay on a lot of that stuff. We would get really politically incorrect with a sequence, or I would go real far and just trust that Jay would say, tone it down or go farther.
Well, there's a whole slew of horror movies coming out, the Jennifer's Body's coming out, and it's all sort of, it's borrowing from all your earlier movies. What do you think about the horror genre right now? Do you think it's going in a good direction with the new, but new and different take on the old?
Well, I think horror is always evolving, and I get a lot of discussion now about the overload of CGI and how it distances you. We were talking about the theater director Bertolt Brecht a minute ago, how it can distance you a little bit from emotionally engaging in something because it looks kind of animated. Right. You see that shimmer, you see that outline, and with some recent CGI movies, we've moved so quick and so fast, and we're so accomplished now that there's some movies made as recently as 4 or 5 years ago that you can't watch now. They look dated already. So I think there's a bit of a backlash. And I know they were coming up with phrases like torture porn for the Saw films and Cabin Fever and Hostel. But I don't really see that as what those films were about. I think they were much more a punk rock reaction to sort of bloated, overproduced special effects epics that maybe didn't really scare, and maybe they were a little incredulous. They really sacrificed credulity for effect. They thought that, the old expression, we can fix it in post, but they didn't really fix it that needed to be fixed. They gave us a great effect, but didn't fix the whole of the plot, or didn't fix the scare or the thrill. So I think the Saw movies and the movies like them, I think were a reaction to a lot of late 90s, early millennium over-budgeted, overproduced films. Now there seems to be another kind of fun return to the kind of nostalgia of what it was like to discover a Sam Raimi film like Evil Dead, or the humor of Freddy Krueger in the first Nightmare on Elm Street films, when that didn't exist at that time. And the thrill and the fear and the sexuality of a John Carpenter film. And so I think there's a return to that, but it's a post-millennial sensibility, and it has a kind of post-YouTube, handmade, homemade craft. They kind of like fun. It's kind of like, I remember the New Wave clubs. The clubs now are very sleek, like a Michael Bay film. They're very sleek and very well produced and loud and beautiful, and everybody's very beautiful. But I remember in the New Wave in the 80s, the clubs were always dive bars and basements and homemade and handmade, and we didn't have a lot of money, and they were kind of put together, or somebody had discovered a great site to use because of the atmosphere. And I think there's an equivalency to that that's occurring in the horror movies. The ones I've been working on lately I call horror farce, like Zombie Strippers, which is a sexy horror farce, like a sex comedy. Right? It's a sexy horror comedy. And I've worked on other. I have one coming out as a horror farce. I've done one that's I call deconstructed horror, movie called Behind the Mask. So I have a variety of these that I've done in the last couple of years, all with very young directors, and it's keeping me young and on my toes. But I had enough response now from critics and from audiences that have seen these films, and some others that I have coming out, that I understand that that's another footnote in horror. That will be a footnote along with Wolfman movies and vampire movies, and my anticipation is for us to take the knowledge we have with special effects and CGI and use that to rediscover how we could do some of the great source material from older films, from period films, like even some folk tales like the Dybbuk, the Russian folk tale. There's films like that not exactly the Anne Rice period film, but maybe some Edgar Allan Poe or something like that. I'm curious to see that done in kind of a mid-level budget, kind of down and dirty, but with the state-of-the-art technology to be used when and where we need it to keep the budget, manageable.
So what has been the scariest movie this year that you've seen?
Scariest movie? Boy, that's this year. It's probably not a movie from this year. Oh, it is. I think it's from this year, or the very end of last year. A movie that worked on me on a claustrophobic, trapped level was 30 Days of Night with Josh Hartnett.
I haven't seen all of it.
I liked it a lot. I liked the buy-in. I liked Danny Houston. There's something very strange about the makeup in that I liked. It's sort of Romanian mutation. So I recommend that film. Yeah, I kind of liked it. And there's a trapped, claustrophobic, paranoid coldness to it. It reminds me of a movie I love that I think is underrated, which is John Carpenter's remake of The Thing, which is also great, starring Kurt Russell, which is a great little movie. One of the last great practical effects movies ever made.
So what do you have coming up that we need to keep our eyes peeled
Oh,
for?
well, Zombie Strippers, hot date. must be on your shelf. I'm off to direct. I'm off to act in a movie in Italy, doing my sort of Vincent Price, Klaus Kinski thing as an Italian count. But I like the script. It's a little bit House of Wax. It's a little bit Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca. And I'm really looking forward to the location. And then I go into pre-production, or finishing my pre-production and casting, on another movie in Italy that I'm directing, tentatively titled either Seasons of Blood, or we have a couple of titles, but it's based on the V, or the Vai, however you want to pronounce it, which is a short story by Nikolai Gogol, the Russian-Ukrainian author. And it's about a fallen angel that falls to earth. He's been punished and reprimanded, and he's the guard of the gate of purgatory. And he crashes into this village, and he sort of keeps the village trapped. And he takes the rich man's beautiful daughter as his bride in waiting to go back to go back to hell with, to purgatory with, and so he's this broken, obese, fallen angel, and a young priest who's lost his faith, perhaps trained as an exorcist, a boy exorcist in his religious order, his Orthodox order, is on a quest, and he finds this village, and he's meant to be there. The girl, the daughter, the rich girl who's in suspended animation like Snow White, she has conjured him and brought him there. So it's basically a fallen angel, a priest who's lost his faith, and a dead girl. Who will win? I don't know.